Terrence Crawford's gloves hit the heavy bag with methodical precision, each strike echoing through the empty gym like gunshots in a cathedral. Sweat carved rivers down his face, pooling at the base of his neck where the gold chain his grandmother gave him caught the fluorescent light. He'd been here since 5 a.m., chasing shadows of doubt that crept in whenever the cameras weren't rolling. The WBO belt meant everything, but lately, everything felt hollow. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he caught movement in the parking lot. A rusted Honda Civic pulled up, its engine coughing like an old man's last breath. A woman emerged, her movements careful and deliberate, before walking around to the passenger side. She opened the door and began unfolding a wheelchair, her hands trembling slightly in the morning cold. Crawford paused mid-combination, his breathing still controlled despite the hour of punishment he'd inflicted on the bag. Something about the scene pulled at him, though he couldn't name what. The woman's patience as she adjusted the wheelchair, the way she checked each lock twice, the tenderness in her movements that spoke of countless mornings just like this one. Hey, if you're watching this and feeling that same pull Crawford felt, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to smash that hype button because what happens next is going to change everything you think you know about champions. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. A boy emerged from the car, maybe 12 years old, his legs thin and motionless beneath worn jeans. But his face, Crawford had seen that expression before, in his own mirror during the hardest training sessions. Pure determination wrapped in a smile that refused to acknowledge limitations. The kid's arms worked the wheelchair wheels with surprising strength, propelling himself toward the community center next door, where a hand-painted sign read, "Riverside Youth Dance Program, all welcome." Crawford's trainer, Marcus, noticed the pause in rhythm. "You good, champ? That bag ain't gonna hit itself." But Crawford was already unwrapping his hands, his eyes tracking the boy's progress across the cracked asphalt. The kid moved with purpose, navigating around potholes and debris with the skill of someone who'd learned to see obstacles as puzzles rather than barriers. His mother followed a few steps behind, her purse clutched tight against her chest, her eyes scanning the neighborhood with the wariness of someone who'd learned to expect trouble. The community center's door stuck, warped from years of weather and neglect. Crawford watched the boy ram his wheelchair against it twice before his mother stepped forward to help. Even from 50 yards away, Crawford could see the flash of frustration cross the kid's face. Not at the door, but at needing help with something so simple. Inside the dance studio, visible through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months, other children were already moving to music Crawford couldn't hear. Their bodies flowed like water, arms and legs creating shapes that defied gravity. The boy positioned his wheelchair at the edge of the group, his hands resting on the wheels, his head tilted as he absorbed the rhythm that pulsed through the floorboards. Crawford found himself walking toward the window that separated the gym from the outside world. His reflection stared back. 6 feet of muscle and scars, hands that had broken bones and dreams in equal measure. But in the glass, superimposed over his own image, he could see the boy beginning to move. It started with his shoulders, a subtle roll that caught the beat. Then his arms joined in, creating patterns in the air that matched the dancers around him. His upper body became liquid, compensating for what his legs couldn't do with an artistry that made Crawford's chest tighten. The other kids noticed and began incorporating his movements into their own, the choreography evolving to include wheels and chair arms as natural extensions of the dance. Marcus appeared beside him, following his gaze. "Kids got rhythm. Kids got more than that," Crawford murmured, watching as the boy spun his wheelchair in a tight circle, his arms extended like wings. The movement was so fluid, so joyful, that for a moment Crawford forgot about the disability entirely. This wasn't adaptation or accommodation. This was pure artistic expression finding its own form. The music stopped, and Crawford could see the instructor, a young woman with paint-stained leggings, clapping enthusiastically. The other children gathered around the boy's wheelchair, their faces bright with excitement, as they peppered him with questions about his moves. But it was the boy's expression that hit Crawford like a left hook to the solar plexus. Pride mixed with surprise, as if he couldn't quite believe he belonged in this space of movement and music. Crawford's phone buzzed against his hip. His manager's name flashed on the screen. probably calling about the upcoming press conference or another sponsorship deal that would add zeros to his bank account without adding meaning to his life. He let it go to voicemail. The boy's mother stood in the corner of the dance studio, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of sadness. Crawford recognized the expression from his own mother's face the night he won his first professional fight. This was joy so pure it hurt, the kind that came from watching someone you love discover they were capable of magic. Through the window, Crawford caught the boy's eye. The kid waved, a casual gesture that somehow felt like an invitation. Crawford raised his hand in response, and something shifted in his chest, like a lock clicking open after years of being stuck. He thought about his own journey to this moment, the poverty, the violence, the nights when giving up seemed easier than getting up for another day of training. Every champion had a story of overcoming, but watching this kid dance, Crawford realized he'd been thinking about it all wrong. It wasn't about overcoming anything. It was about finding the rhythm that was uniquely yours, and moving to it regardless of what the world said was possible. The dance class ended, and the children began filing out. The boy wheeled himself toward the exit, but paused at the door to look back at the studio. His expression held the same longing Crawford felt after every fight, the desire to stay in that space where everything made sense, where your body could do impossible things, where the crowd's energy lifted you beyond your own limitations. Crawford made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. He grabbed his gym bag and headed for the door, ignoring Marcus's confused questions. Outside, the morning air carried the scent of rain and possibility. The boy and his mother were at their car, the wheelchair folding process reversed with the same careful attention to detail. "Excuse me," Crawford called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The woman turned, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. "Oh my God, I'm Terrence," he said, extending his hand. "I was watching through the window. Your son, he's incredible." The boy looked up from the passenger seat, his face cycling through confusion, excitement, and disbelief. "You're the champion, the real champion." "We both are," Crawford said, and meant it. "What's your name?" "David. David Martinez." The kid's voice carried the slight breathlessness of someone trying to process an impossible moment. "David, I've been training in there for 2 years and I've never seen anyone move like you just did. That spin you did, how'd you figure that out?" David's face lit up. "I just felt the music, you know? Like my legs don't work, but the beat goes through the whole chair, through my whole body. So I use what I got." Crawford nodded, understanding flooding through him. "Use what you got. That's the secret, isn't it?" David's mother, Maria, had been silent, her eyes moving between her son and the man who'd just compared himself to a 12-year-old in a wheelchair. "David's been dancing since he was little," she said finally. "Before the accident, after the accident. Nothing stops him." "What happened?" Crawford asked gently. "Car accident when I was 8, David said matter-of-factly. "Drunk driver. Mom says I was dancing in the hospital bed before I even woke up all the way." The simplicity of it hit Crawford harder than any opponent ever had. No self-pity, no anger at the unfairness of it all. Just acceptance and the immediate pivot to what was possible rather than what was lost. "You know what?" Crawford said, an idea forming. "I've got a fight coming up in 6 weeks. Big one. And I always train better when I've got the right inspiration." He paused, meeting David's eyes. "How would you like to be part of my training team?" Maria's hand flew to her chest. "What do you mean?" "I mean, David here just taught me something about rhythm and adaptation that my trainers have been trying to get through my thick skull for months. I'd like him to come by the gym sometimes, show me some of those moves. Maybe I can show him a thing or two about boxing footwork or, boxing wheel work." David's laugh was pure joy, the sound echoing off the buildings around them. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Champions recognize champions, David. And you, my friend, are definitely a champion." The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm Crawford had never experienced. David came to the gym every Tuesday and Thursday, rolling through the doors with an energy that transformed the entire space. The other fighters, initially skeptical, quickly became fascinated by his approach to movement and balance. David's perspective on body mechanics, how to generate power from your core when your foundation was different from everyone else's, revolutionized Crawford's understanding of his own technique. But it was more than the technical aspects. David brought something Crawford hadn't realized he'd been missing: pure love for the art of movement. Watching the kid work through a new sequence, his face scrunched in concentration before breaking into a grin when he nailed it, reminded Crawford why he'd fallen in love with boxing in the first place. "You're different," Marcus observed one afternoon, as they watched David demonstrate a spinning technique to two heavyweight contenders who were taking notes like graduate students. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you remember why you're here instead of just going through the motions." Crawford considered this, his eyes on David, who was now attempting to teach the heavyweights how to incorporate chair spins into their defensive movement. The sight of two 250-pound men trying to pivot like dancers while David cheered them on was absurd and beautiful, and somehow exactly what the gym had been missing. "He reminds me of something I forgot," Crawford said finally. "What's that?" "That this is supposed to be fun." The breakthrough came during week 4. Crawford had been struggling with a particular combination, a defensive slip followed by a counter that required perfect timing and balance. He'd drilled it thousands of times, but in sparring it felt mechanical, predictable. David watched from his usual spot near the ring, his head tilted in that way that meant he was analyzing movement patterns. After the session, he wheeled over to Crawford. "Can I show you something?" Crawford knelt down to David's eye level. "Always. That move you're working on, you're thinking about it like steps, right? Like step 1, step 2, step 3? Yeah, that's how combinations work." David shook his head. "But that's not how dancing works. In dancing, it's all one movement that flows. Watch." He demonstrated with his upper body, his torso flowing from one position to another in a seamless wave. "See? It's not 3 moves. It's one move with 3 parts. The slip isn't separate from the counter, they're connected by the same rhythm." Crawford stared at him, the concept clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. "Show me again." David repeated the movement, and this time Crawford could see it. The way each part of the sequence grew organically from the part before it, like a song where each note led inevitably to the next. The next day, Crawford tried the combination with David's insight in mind. Instead of thinking about discrete movements, he let his body flow from defense to offense like water finding its course. The difference was immediate and profound. His sparring partner, a veteran who'd been catching him with counters all week, suddenly couldn't touch him. "There it is," Marcus breathed from ringside. "There's the flow we've been looking for." But Crawford wasn't thinking about technique anymore. He was thinking about David's face when he'd made the connection, the pure joy of sharing knowledge and seeing it take root. This was what being a champion really meant. Not just winning fights, but lifting others up, creating moments of possibility where none had existed before. The night before the fight, Crawford couldn't sleep. He found himself at the gym at 2 a.m. not to train, but just to be in the space where he and David had discovered something together. The heavy bag hung motionless in the darkness, and Crawford could almost hear the echo of David's laughter from their last session. His phone rang. Maria's name on the screen sent a spike of worry through his chest. "Maria, everything okay?" "Terrence, I'm sorry to call so late. David wanted me to call you. He's been worried about you all day." "Worried about me? Why?" "He says you get too serious before fights. He wanted me to tell you something." Crawford smiled despite his nerves. "Put him on." David's voice came through the phone, sleepy but determined. "Hey, champ. Hey, champ yourself. What's this about me being too serious?" "You are, I can tell. But here's the thing. Tomorrow when you're in there, just remember what we learned. It's all one dance, okay? Don't think about winning or losing, just feel the rhythm and move." Crawford's throat tightened. "David, and one more thing. No matter what happens tomorrow, you're already my champion. You changed everything for me, you know that? Before I met you, I thought I was just a kid in a wheelchair who liked to dance. Now I know I'm a dancer who happens to use a wheelchair. There's a difference." After hanging up, Crawford sat in the darkness of the gym, David's words echoing in his mind. The kid had articulated something Crawford had been feeling but couldn't name. The shift from seeing limitations to seeing possibilities, from focusing on what you couldn't do to celebrating what you could. Fight night arrived with the weight of expectation that always accompanied championship bouts. The arena buzzed with energy, cameras capturing every angle, commentators dissecting every possible outcome. But as Crawford made his way to the ring, he carried with him something none of the analysts could quantify: the memory of a 12-year-old boy who'd taught him that movement was music, that adaptation was art, that true strength came from finding your rhythm and dancing to it regardless of the stage. In the third round, when his opponent caught him with a shot that would have dropped him 6 months ago, Crawford didn't think about technique or strategy. He thought about David's demonstration of flow, of how one movement led naturally to the next. His body responded not with mechanical precision, but with organic grace, slipping the follow-up punch and countering with a combination that seemed to emerge from the rhythm of the fight itself. The crowd erupted, but Crawford barely heard them. He was lost in the dance, moving to a beat only he could hear, guided by the wisdom of a kid who'd learned to find beauty in adaptation. When the final bell rang and his hand was raised in victory, Crawford's eyes found the section where David and Maria sat. The boy was on his feet, or rather, elevated in his chair, his arms raised in triumph, his face radiant with shared joy. In that moment, Crawford understood that the real victory wasn't the belt around his waist or the roar of the crowd. It was the connection forged between two champions who'd recognized something essential in each other. As you watch this story unfold, think about the rhythms in your own life, the moments when someone unexpected taught you to see yourself differently. Maybe you've been that teacher for someone else, or maybe you're still waiting for your David to roll into your gym and change everything. Either way, you're part of this dance we're all doing together, finding our own ways to move through a world that doesn't always accommodate our particular steps. The music never stops, we just have to listen for our part in the symphony. This story is a work of fiction, though the truth it contains about human connection and the power of seeing beyond limitations is as real as the ground beneath our feet.